Good morning, everybody. I'm Ido. I'm the publisher of a little online magazine called The Kernel, but more importantly, with my lovely partner Hans over here, I founded a Berlin-based event series called Hi Berlin. And what we do with Hi on a daily basis, pretty much, is bringing together Europe's most promising startups and existing digital business leaders, or not yet so digital business leaders, and media, etc., etc. So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to put on a little panel here, have both sides to it, have some rising stars on the corporate front, the guys behind Axel Springer's and ProSieben's Sat.1's digital strategy, and Flo from IM. But before we're going to do the panel, we're going to do a quick keynote from somebody whom we flew in. Basically, you paid your own flights, right? So he flew in himself, but we're glad he's here, from Silicon Valley. He's working on his 78th startup now. He's raised over $800 million in funding. That's a lot of money. And he's going to talk to us a bit about how he's basically revolutionizing maybe online communication across all kinds of platforms and across all kinds of devices. And maybe he can talk a bit about how he went from a corporate background to a startup world and now maybe back with growing into one again. And we're going to do this pretty quick. Let's try to make it as open as possible. So if you don't mind, if you guys have any questions, raise your hands and shout at him or me or us. And right after the panel, right after the quick keynote, we'll do the panel and open it up anyways. So please welcome with me Jay Samit, founder of ooVoo.
Good morning, everybody. What I want to do this morning is give you a little bit of perspective on where we see the internet, mobile, and entertainment going in the near future. And to do that, I just want to do 2 seconds to give you a little bit about my background of where this perspective is coming from. I'm a serial entrepreneur that builds up companies and then starts divisions at the big companies that buy them. I've been in charge globally of the internet for companies such as NBC Universal and Sony. So there are big media companies that had to face this, done the same in the music industry in running labels. And then on the startup side, was part of the teams that started things like eBay and LinkedIn and many smaller companies that you haven't heard of. And my most recent company is a company called ooVoo. ooVoo is a Skype competitor. The difference is we are in the cloud. And so the data I'll be sharing today is really what we've seen from having millions and millions of users video chatting for a little more than 1 billion minutes a month, predominantly through mobile. We're a top 100 app in 130 countries at this point. And next year, you'll see us preloaded on over 300 million devices. So our primary users are not business people doing that scheduled conference call. It's young people spending time with the people that they spent the time during the day. I don't know my European stats as well as I know overall world and US. But an interesting thing happened in 2012. For the first time in the United States history since 1876, the number of minutes of voice calls dropped. Gen Y, the most annoying thing you can do to a millennial is leave them a voicemail. They prefer texting. It's asynchronous, it's efficient. But for those that they're most intimate with, they like video communication. So what we've seen is this tremendous growth of people being able to do both talk to each other, but more importantly, when life hands you that unexpected moment, you can now share with those people closest to you, no matter where you are and when you are. Equally, this is how people are deciding what content to bring into their life. So it is no longer scrolling through endless stations where somebody else pre-programmed what is important to you. It is about crowdsourcing. It is about your peer group deciding that which is most important. So what's the state of the industry right now? And I'll breeze through stats. If anybody wants these, I'll give them to you later so you don't have to take notes or pay attention. God knows I don't. Smartphones changing the world right now as we know it, majority. And when you really look down here, it's the fact that the primary way of getting onto the internet globally is very quickly becoming mobile. So mobile's changing how we're doing it, and it's not just changing the size of the screen, but the context in which you're using that screen. Because when you were at a desk or when you were at a television, it was the primary reason you were in front of that screen. Mobile, you may be doing something else. It is part of the experience. It's not the sole focus. And it's that sharing of mindset that has to change how you create content, how you organize content, and how you distribute content. So we allow people to have up to 12 people on a video call, or you could take any one of those feeds and bring in a movie, a TV show, a viral video. So if it was fun to share a YouTube video with a friend, it's more fun to watch them watching it and laugh at it. And then you can record that whole experience and post that. So it's really changing how people are becoming content, not just creators, but more of content arbiters of taste. So the other thing that's already happened is mobile's already exceeded newspapers and magazines in combined reach and revenue. And this trend is just beginning. And as we look to Asia, as we look at, I just spent time in India, the next billion people getting onto the internet will be joining via mobile. So we're in a mobile moment. And 2012, as I mentioned, was a major milestone and when the world pivoted to majority mobile. When you start talking about 100 billion apps downloaded, that's an unbelievable amount of traffic. Now, I'm flattered to be one of the top 100 apps in the world, but I will tell you that the majority of apps that are downloaded after 24 hours are never used again. So getting your person to use your app, getting a person into a mobile environment is just the beginning of the challenge. Keeping them engaged, keeping them part of it is really where it goes. And search is now taking place mostly mobile, which is why Google moved into Android and why it became such an important. So, if 85% of the world now has mobile, if the cost of Android phones are now coming down in third world countries to sub 25 euro, you're going to see that it's an all smartphone world. And we're talking about, by 2015, 9 billion connected. Well, that's not 9 billion people because we're not reproducing that fast, though we're doing a good job of it. I'm trying to censor my typical jokes. But what we're talking about is we're going to have more than 1 billion devices go into the internet. So in places where we're willing to exchange privacy, we can walk into a business and the environment knows who we are, the devices know who we are. If I'm shopping at a store and choosing between 2 printers and I'm within the field of their RFID, one printer might talk to me and give me $10 off. The other printer might raise that to $15 off. You'll see variable pricing of all goods. One of the precursors of this concept is if you're ever bored on an international flight and you're not afraid of the Sky Marshal, ask each person on the plane what they paid for a ticket, and you will not find 2 people that paid the same price for a ticket. They have big data, big knowledge, and can variable price by all kinds of factors. Every product you buy at retail will have that same data in the next 3 years. So this is a battle, about mobile shelf space. Getting to the phone is half the battle. It's now how do you get that top of mind? How do you get usage? How do you get engagement? How do you get your content to resonate? How do you get your ad noticed? How do you make commerce happen? So my friend Mary Meeker pointed out, and there's 2 slides of hers in here that are really amazing. I know you can't read the colors, but the green and the yellow, those are sales of mobile, tablets and phones. The PCs and desktops are the blue and the orange. Notice they're flat and dying. Mobile's taken over in the hardware space. The second screen outsells the first screen. So we got to get over our insecurity and stop referring to it as a second screen. It's a screen we look at 150 times a day. This is a US stat, but it's pretty indicative of how the rest of the world will go, in that the dark blue is the number of minutes we spend in front of a television. That hasn't changed. It's staying constant. TV isn't going away. What's happening, though, is mobile and web in aggregate are now exceeding TV. And now that the majority of televisions being sold are connected TVs, the battle's over. You have the choice of what you want to see on what screen, when, and how. So television programming has to compete for that same screen space with internet programming, with your friends, with communication. So the disruption's already happened, and the main factor of the disruption is the amount of content being consumed by the consumer today exceeds the amount of hours awake, which means you're having multiple screens open at the same time, which means you're not getting undivided attention. So the disruption is media isn't consumed in a vacuum. It is part of a social experience, and unless you're creating your content to be enjoyed, to be replicated, to be marketed in that social context, you'll die on the vine. Cable, satellite, made the majority of their money from programming and advertising, was a great model. If you now look, access to internet, broadband services, and digital goods are now hitting the point where they will start exceeding the revenue. That will change the balance of power for content creators because they'll no longer be the major source of revenue for the pipes out there. And pipes aren't stupid. Pipes take whoever pays them the most to fill them up. And so bits will be handled differently. So what's the entrepreneur to do? And the simplest thing is to keep it simple, stupid. You look at a trend, focus in on what is the change in demographics, in technology, in distribution, and where is there a hole? Big companies, and I've run some of the biggest in the world. I was number 3 of a company with 170,000 people. Changing that ship and getting that to do something new is near impossible. 3 guys in a garage can do anything. They just need some funding and some help. So give you my favorite example of recent, Instagram. Any of you could have started it. It was not a big whoo-hoo. How'd they ever invent that? But here's what they did that you didn't do. They noticed a demographic change. Last year, the majority of photos in the history of mankind were taken. Photography's been around 150 years, yet the majority of photos were taken in 1 year. We're using imagery differently. We're becoming post-literate, which is another way to say illiterate, but I like post-literate, it sounds better. So if you knew that the world was going to image-based, then you make the image the center of your experience, and you're natural to be acquired. $1 billion with less than 10 people and no revenues, it's something I would aspire to do. So where's the new internet? It's in your pants. All of us are carrying around a CNN truck, an RTL truck. Everybody is now capable of being a content producer. And with everything in the cloud, with SaaS-based software, the cost to launch a global business is de minimis. So if you look at Facebook, the number of people that are now using Facebook mobile exclusively is now starting to become a third. By the end of next year, it'll be the majority. Some of these trends change content. I spent a number of years running music companies, and as disheartening as this fact is that some of my favorite bands never made it to #1, why is Rihanna making it to #1? Because how people are discovering music, sharing music, and choosing to purchase music has changed. So you may think that that's the most popular video, did pretty well here, but the biggest video in the world was Gangnam Style, okay? Didn't come from Hollywood, didn't come from Europe, didn't come from Japan, came from a guy who went to Berkeley and went back to Korea. The difference here is 40% of all YouTube views are music video. So radio isn't where music's discovered. YouTube is not where music is discovered. It's where music is enjoyed. It's discovered through social context. Someone pointed you to, somebody sent you the link, somebody told you about it. There wasn't a schedule that said, ooh, we're playing albums at 11 p.m. So for a lot of people, the thought was that the second screen is more data, more stats about what's going on the first screen. That is doomed to failure. The second screen is about bringing that experience with you. So yesterday, there was a great presentation here from Google talking about that sofa in that living room of my childhood where you had one screen and we all sat around, whether we liked it or not, and we watched together. Today's homes, there's more screens than there are people, but you don't have to watch alone. You can now watch with your friends, talk with your friends, do things with your friends. And this is where we're getting this amazing amount of knowledge at ooVoo. So we had a technical term for it in the US is a pissing contest between one of our cable companies and one of our TV channels this past month, where the cable company blocked all of CBS because there was a dispute. So what did consumers do? They took their phone out, they pointed at the screen in the cities that still had those shows, and they let their friends on ooVoo watch it. So everybody becomes a rebroadcaster. You can say legal, not legal, we can have those debates. The genie's out of the box just like it was a decade ago with Napster. And if you think this is just affecting programming, the genie's also out of the box on 3D printing, and wait till you see what that does for physical goods. So our answer for this is we don't believe that we know every solution for every possible thing out there. Video dating, video poker. We have a great video poker company that's using us right now. Anybody, by show of hands, play online poker? Nobody will admit it. Anyway, if you look at it, it looks like a video game where you don't know, am I really playing against 9 other people, or is this a clever Russian program to take my money? So what this particular company did was they put in our video chat into it so you could see all the other players, still anonymously, but you know you're playing against real human beings, and you go, really? Can you beat a pair of queens? So by putting video into other apps, you're now allowing social to be part of the experience, whether it's sports, whether it's scripted program, or more importantly, reality programming. So we've allowed fans to talk with players on the bench before they go out and play. We've allowed fans to communicate backstage with everybody at the Oscars. So it gets people to be more engaged. It builds the Twitter following or Facebook following of the celebrities and allows them to market their brand directly to their fan. So very simple use. So at the end of the day, mobile means that we've moved from text, as I said, and we moved into image. So what's next? So in very quick 5 minutes, I want to give you my predictions of where I believe the trends are going and where you can capitalize, and there's huge opportunities to start companies. So the amount of mobile messaging will still double. Let that sink in for a second. We're not even at the halfway point of what is going to be happening in this medium. If you think of other industries before they got to the halfway size of growth, the fortunes that could be made. So it's really about combining communications and social. It's knowing what that customer's preferences are and satisfying that when it matches their schedule. So the more you can personalize each piece of content you're delivering, the more that person will then add to that personalization and share and expand the base for it. And as I said, you're now talking about mobile exceeding all desktop. So if whatever you're doing is still focused on that PC, Mac, big screen experience, you're destined to be eclipsed. August 2012, so a year ago, was when ooVoo went from majority PC-based to majority mobile. And now we're 80% mobile. We didn't do anything different, the customer decided. So advertising is not going to solve it in the old way. So we know about digital dollars went to digital dimes and now to pennies when you get into mobile. It's not going to work because you're not getting that full share of mind. So if your ad message isn't content, you're lost. So what's content as ad message? How many of us watched a lunatic jump from space for Red Bull? I was riveted. And just as one aside, because they get one per speech, he was up there, standing there, and they're doing the checklist of everything before he jumps out back to planet Earth, something I would never do. And the guy goes to him, and do you have 10 minutes of oxygen? I'm like, really? You send a guy out of space, you spend millions and millions of dollars, and he's got 10 minutes of oxygen? Like, what if he got the math wrong? Like, he's just falling and like, you're out. But I digress. So if there's one thing I'd leave you with today, this is how you have to think of the relationship with content. Social, location, and mobile. Unless you combine those three, you're going to be an island. And you can't get two of the three. And we can go through who's doing what best. Big company, small company, doesn't make a difference. The next thing is, it's not just about talking to people. It has to be about talking to machines, because machines will be who we'll rely on to enhance the experience of where we are. I really don't care about Van Gogh, but if I'm standing in a museum in front of his painting, I might want to know something about him. Well, that's context. And that's how we deal with everything out there. And there's a million ways that we can get big data into the equation. I'm sure everybody's by now seen this, the difference between announcing a pope in just a few years. First, people wanted to be there and experience. Now they want to show how cool they are and be broadcasters and share with everybody. They're not capturing it for themselves. They're capturing it because the next generation of millennials do not believe that they'll be wealthy, but they do believe they'll be famous. We have a generation where everyone will be famous. And our homes become connected into this. So business as usual is over. And more data really means more creativity. It's not just scrubbing the numbers to give a report of what you've done. It's to use those numbers to take your business someplace that it hasn't been before. So when you think of Tony Stark, how is he going to figure out what he wants to watch? And that's how you have to think of it for all your viewers, because pretty much everything that Tony Stark is doing in sci-fi today, everybody else is going to be doing within the next couple years, if they're not doing it already. So for a whole generation, they believe that any idea, any problem, anything that they need, there must be an app for it. And when they don't find the app, the interesting thing in studies is it's because they don't believe they know how to find the app. They don't believe that no one thought to make that app for them yet. And that's the opportunity. So start looking at what their lifestyles are, because they assume that we live our lives the same way. The other thing about content is that it's a filter problem. With 100 hours of YouTube videos going up every minute, obviously no one's seen it all. So how do you source that? The scheduling, the timing, the whole binge watching of series. There are a whole series that I love, that I've heard about, that I've never watched, that are on my list that I'll save them for a plane, I'll get around to it, Love Game of Thrones, but unless you binge watch it, there's no way you can tell me you could keep track of those characters. There's too many of them. So the idea that you're going to have a bunch of people doing this for you and that you're going to pay for a bundle of channels is identical to the mythology that the album exists. The album, when I negotiated with Jobs 10, 12 years ago, he allowed you to buy each song individually, and that was the end. That was the end of the music industry. Not piracy, but I didn't get to sell you 15 euros worth of music if you only wanted one song. You bought the one song. I have 5 cable boxes. I pay a ridiculous amount for cable. Most of my bill is sports. I have yet to watch a sports show, but I'm forced to buy ESPN and all 5 of their ESPN channels, including the greatest hits of games from before I was born. So this will change, and consumer empowerment changes that. Curation is what you need to focus on. Who are the content creators? Who are the leaders? Who are following them? And the TV set is not irrelevant. The TV set is internet enabled, so you can reach that screen and you can make that conversation between the phone in their hand, the tablet in their hand, and that screen for a complete immersive experience that they can then bring others into, so that your numbers go up during a broadcast as opposed to trail off. But the real question, and the question each of you should be thinking about, is who controls it? It's wide open right now. Whether it's the TV show and the content creator, whether it's the broadcaster that's laying out the money, whether it's the platform that thinks by signing 9- and 10-year contracts that they can tie stuff up, whether it's third parties that are inventing stuff, or whether it's a social network that realizes that they can get all the advertising dollars and not pay for any of the content. So a great experiment. I won't go into it here, but if you haven't heard about this, they're basically getting some great data of what consumers do enjoy doing right now. And if it works in one country, you can adapt it for others. And then this isn't the end. We're just at the beginning about wearables. So whether it's Google Glass, which if you've played with it is not the greatest experience, but it's a taste of where we might go. Everybody's coming out with watches because pulling something out of my pocket is just too difficult. But I think we'll come up with this as a new screen for specialty use cases. And so in conclusion, all of the infrastructure's in place for this major revolution. The cost of change, the cost of launching a business today is a fraction of what it was just 2 years ago. In the case of ooVoo, we're completely cloud-based. We're not peer-to-peer. So we host everything in HD in the cloud, and we can do that for 1 billion, 1.5 billion minutes a month for next to nothing. So it is a different world. So there's no advantage to a big company as far as distribution or access to capital. And I'll make a couple predictions. The speaker from YouTube tipped this off yesterday. YouTube's now going to start charging. They're going to look that there is content that you're willing to pay for, and there's content that you'd like to pay for, because the honor of you paying for it, or only limited number of people get to pay for it, makes you special cool. So the other thing that ties into this is payment. PayPal, Alon and Reed did a great job when we all got that going in the beginning. But there's a new sheriff in town, and pay attention. The idea that governments don't control currency is radical, and it may be the most honest currency out there. I'm not making an opinion, but it's definitely changing the way content will move. If you want to get this or follow me on Twitter, happy to be here. Thanks.
Okay, I think we gotta move a bit over here so they can do the panel setup. Well, we're in that corner of the stage. Okay, cool. I think that was pretty much Silicon Valley in a box and 50 slides.
There you go.
I hope you guys took some stuff away. I have 1, 2, 3 questions on ooVoo, if you don't mind, and then we'll, once those guys are set up, we'll continue. So basically, I remember like 10 years ago, like my friends and I, we were using ICQ, and we thought, oh my God, communications reinvented. We are the coolest kids in town because we are on this flower, messaging service. And then Skype came along, and that was a revolution. And you felt, okay, but now it's done. Like, what else is there to do, right? And okay, you guys say you're in the cloud, and that makes it different from Skype. But you attract like tens of millions of users, way younger than us even, like, teenagers, yep. My kid, brother, etc. And more to the right even. Why is that? Like, how does communication still change, and how do you leverage that?
So we all are creatures of habit. It's a natural process of growing up. We develop habits, so we have to make less decisions during the day, and we're used to a phone. When you actually think about a voice call, it is the dumbest form of communication, because when your wife calls and says everything's fine, you can't tell anything. Yet if you saw her face, you would know everything's fine is not real good. And text doesn't work real well for that either. So we need the face-to-face. The second big change is there wasn't the bandwidth or the capability before to have multiple people, 3 friends, 4 friends, 5 friends, everybody together on one call. And when you think of it, historically, we are tribal. We are used to communicating, solving problems, doing things as a group. Let's all pick a restaurant to go to. Why not search the web together and all be using the same menu at the same time and being able to see each other and have that conversation? So being able now to move and simulate the type of face-to-face communication that we had in the real world, it was natural. Young kids, given the choice, they didn't have the habit of voice. They don't use it.
They use Snapchat.
Snapchat, a great example, because they're using images not as, I'm going to take it and develop and frame it and give it to grandma. It's visual communication that's here for a second. It doesn't need to be there for posterity.
It's like smoke signals, basically.
Well, I want you to see what I see for the moment. So it'll continue to evolve.
Okay. I gotta ask though, so there's been quite some news about what teenagers might use Snapchat for and what they maybe shouldn't use it for. How do you guys treat that topic? I believe there is a record function for ooVoo, which means you can basically record your conversations. Yeah,
so you can record and you can post, and the other person knows that they're being recorded, and if they don't want, they can stop you from recording, so it's all that. Let's face it, there are people that love to see each other in the most intimate of ways, and that's their choice. We are a system that's designed for you to talk to people that you know as opposed to meet strangers. So it's very well policed, and we respect, especially with minors, keeping them safe as much as possible. Visual communication and recording. I'll give you a great example. So I used to talk about ooVoo moments of, wouldn't it be great to see baby's first step and this type of stuff. And I was overseas when I was talking to my girlfriend on the phone, and my son ooVooed in, and she asked if she could stay on. And I said, okay. I didn't think it through, like why, but it was the middle of the night. And he wanted to tell me that he'd just proposed. And she wanted to see my face when I heard that news. And they got to record that moment, and that was like really cool. That's what you can now do in this world, and that's why embedding this, imagine that same experience where you used to call a radio station and you didn't know that Jay-Z was going to be in the studio, and you're now, oh my God, I'm talking to Jay-Z, I'm the world's biggest Jay-Z fan. And now you can record that and post that, and that's why we're opening the SDK so that everybody can have those choice moments to savor.
Okay. One last question might be interesting to a couple of digitizing people in here. So you guys say it's super important for you guys to be, cross-platform, cross-device, right, basically since day one, right? You've been developing this insanely fast. You've been known for it. You always said like your mobile user experience is so important to you guys. How do you go with it from an organizational point of view? How do you do it development-wise? Because it is tricky. I mean.
So we have 100 engineers in-house that are brilliant at what they do, and we're lacking skill sets. So if there's platforms that you don't have the skill set, hire the best development team out of house to do that while you recruit and staff and try to change. It also means that just like any company, you have to constantly build your internal capabilities, which may mean, upgrading some of your personnel and changing stuff around. The number of platforms, we now support 470 different devices, and now being integrated down into the kernel and using 75% less battery than the competition is really about working with manufacturers. So it is a speed of trying to work with that. And I got to say, in 2013, at least the majority of our development was done out of house, even though we had 100 engineers supporting the out-of-house teams. It's the only way. Reid Hoffman has a great expression: a startup is the only business where you assemble a plane after you jump off the cliff. And that's really, what you have to do is just run as fast as you can and hope you get it together.
Okay, we're glad you're still flying. Let's go over to the panel and introduce the rest of the bunch. So we have the corporate guys over here, classic, and the startup guys over here. Right over there we have Jens Müffelmann, basically in charge of all things electronic media at Axel Springer. Yeah, give him a hand. And maybe the mastermind behind digitizing Axel Springer's business, who knows? And then we have Mato from ProSiebenSat.1. So they've created a new position for him. He's not only the COO, but also founding partner of Epic Companies. They're a company builder and incubator. Now also maybe digitizing their entire business. Who knows? And then we have Hans, my very lovely and handsome co-founder over here, who basically, as a daytime job, builds a health company, a mobile health company, and at nights fights crime with me and builds Hi Berlin. And as final panelists, we have our awesome friend, Flo Meissner, from IM. You should say who the person is and then clap. You guys have 1 million downloads a day, a month, a week, a month. Okay, a day, not yet, but you'll be there. Fighting Instagram like pros? Shouldn't.
Not quite. I mean, we can go into the details in a little bit. But
yeah, I think I should go.
Thank you, Ido.
Yeah, I'm on stage. You guys enjoy, and 11:30, Hans.
Cool. Quick before we start, I want to have an overview for the panelists of who's in the audience. All the women raise your hand, just so we see how many women are in the room. Oh, that's not that bad for our industry. Who is working with media? I guess that's everyone. Are there any entrepreneurs in the room or self-employed people? Please raise your hands. And I guess then the rest is people working for companies. So can you raise your hands? Yeah. Cool. Who is from the TV industry or moving image? And what are the other industries? Can someone shout real quick? Print. Who's from print? One person. Okay. Me too. Okay, cool. So we have a rough overview. Thank you. So I want to jump right into it, Jens. Can you tell us about Plug and Play, the accelerator Axel Springer just launched, and what's your ideas behind it, and what are you doing there?
Yes. Sure. Yeah, Plug and Play, our accelerator, we launched together with Plug and Play Silicon Valley. It's a new initiative we started about a year ago. If you look back at Axel Springer, our investment strategy has been the last 10 years, rather later stage investment. And we said 1 year ago, let's focus more on early stage investment. So there were several initiatives. One was Plug and Play. We also sent over 3 executives to the Silicon Valley. We have done direct investment. But for us, it's now, later stage has been working very well. We do 40% of revenues now in digital space, but let's tap more on early stage companies and the business opportunities there. And then we just did finished the first program. We had invested in 8 companies and are doing now the second program. Just had the pitch days, and we are not alone in Berlin. There are others who also set up similar activities.
So Marto, what is Pro7 doing?
In the incubation space?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So earlier this year in February, I launched Epic Companies as a joint venture with Pro7, and the background is quite simple, right? Pro7 realized that TV is a very powerful channel to promote and build startups. Last but not least, with Zalando. So TV is a powerful tool to A, create direct response, and B, build a strong brand. Zalando is I think, top of mind, 95% brand awareness in Germany, right? So by observing this, they obviously thought about, why don't we do it ourselves? So why don't we create much more in the value creation than just a few percentage points of a company, right? So that's how the initial thought of Pro7 came along, and then we discussed about potential ways to execute, and I think we found a very good solution with Epic Companies. So far, we've a portfolio of 4 companies, 2 more coming up in the next weeks or months. So I think traction, we can be very happy with that.
Cool. Yeah. We'll get back to that. Flo, what's IAM and what's photography?
Exactly. So first of all, thanks, Jay, for the amazing introduction. You pointed something out which I really liked, which was, I'll just speak louder. 2012, we actually created 380 billion photos, and it's 4 times higher than 10 years ago. And probably in a couple of years, there will be more photos taken in one single year than ever in photographic history. I'm not talking photos, I'm talking video, I'm talking content. And that's because a couple of companies also, you mentioned the likes of Instagram, made it very easy for us to photo filters and etc. Create content, share this with our friends, and our friends on Facebook and whatnot. So the big problem is we are creating huge billions pieces of content out there, and they're all lost in a digital oblivion because they're not findable because they lack data. And on the other hand of that side, you have publishers, you have companies, small businesses, mid-sized companies who want to use that content. And so what our mission really is, we want to be the first company in the world who indexes these photos and makes them findable, create the next generation of photo search, but also create a business model around it and actually connects all the content creators out there the people who want to use that content all over the world. We have a growing community of our mobile photo apps, basically available on Android and iPhone for free. That's correct. We want live in 150 countries at the moment. Our top 5 countries don't include Germany. It's actually the US. It's Brazil, Japan, Turkey, Russia. Then basically, we are growing at a roughly a little bit more than $1 million at the moment per month. And it's a very exciting momentum for us because I think, photo filters is the first generation of photo sharing, and we are focused on the next generation, which is data filters.
Jay, so thank you for your amazing presentation. You said earlier that you are sort of in between startups and corporations. Why are you still working?
I don't play golf. I enjoy this game. I like building companies, and then eventually they either take them public or they get bought by a giant, and then you start a division. You become what we call an entrepreneur, and then you get fed up with big companies, and you leave and you do it again. It's what I do.
And what's in for the companies? What's sort of founding a startup? How does this transition process look like when you get bought?
Doesn't go well for many entrepreneurs. So the allure of being bought by a big company is you have access to their distribution, you have access to their capital, you have access to their market, all these maybe IP, different knowledge sets. My first company was acquired by Universal, and all of a sudden I'm looking like, oh, they've got theme parks, they've got movies, they've got TV stations. Oh, all the stuff I could do with all these great characters. And then you realize the silos inside companies that don't talk to each other and don't work with each other and don't care that you exist. And for many entrepreneurs, it becomes that you're banging your head against a wall. On the other side, and so usually founders, after the contract goes, founders tend to leave. On the other hand, for those employees that joined you, that followed you as the Pied Piper when you start a company, they now get the security of doing what they came to do in a better run, more stable environment. And so in the best acquisitions, startups flourish. The success rate, probably about 25%, are there 2-3 years later. That being said, I've also seen entrepreneurs come in and within 2-3 years be the CEO of the parent company, where you can change the entire corporate culture. That usually has to be when you're acquired, like print would be a great example. I don't know the particulars, and I don't want to be the ugly American, though I already am. But in many situations, you'll have a print empire in the US that is like so done for that the board finally says, well, let's let the digital guy run it because we don't know what we're doing.
We have a famous example in Germany. That's René Obermann, the CEO of Deutsche Telekom.
So I wasn't naming names. But so you can have the best example. And I go back and forth. I love a well-run big company. I have yet to work at one of those. When you're at a startup, just the energy of how fast you can see that your decisions make a difference of whether you live or die, whether you get to bet the company, the entire company, everybody's paycheck, monthly, right? That's an adrenaline rush. It's living on that edge, and you can only run that way with people that are like-minded. So, it takes the right type of board.
Right. Marto, you live in these two worlds, right? You run Epic and you're the CEO of ProSiebenSat.1. How is that? How do you balance that?
It's an interesting question. I think if you play it well, it's a perfect combination because both sides can benefit from each other. I think the key thing is to be able to build a speedboat while driving next to a tanker, right? To be able to maneuver, to be flexible, to have quick decision-making processes, while at the same time being close enough to somebody who gives you resources, knowledge, media, cash, etc. So I think that's very important. And I think what's really important, I think one of the topics that we're supposed to discuss is, should corporates be startups? I think every corporate would fail if they try to be a startup. As you said, like startups jump off and then they figure out how to build a plane. If corporates did that, that would be impossible, right? So I think finding the right balance between getting influence from A to B and vice versa, I think that's key to success.
So what should corporates do? Is it like, so just to give you a little piece of information, Epic has one company that sells dog food, right? Which is the big story of the new economy, the failed dog food. What was it called?
Our venture?
No, back then.
Pets.com.
Yeah, Pets.com. So why is ProSieben selling dog food?
Well, obviously, Epic company. We're not building media companies, right? So it's not that we provide content, etc. But where is the strategic fit? The strategic fit is that the market for pet food and pet supply is a mass market where branded goods are very important, right? So this is very TVable as we see it. So the reach, the assets of ProSiebenSat.1 are perfectly suited to promote this venture into the market. So that's where the strategic fit goes. Why did we decide to do it? It's this huge market. It's underserved. It's very attractive. And I think 10 years ago, the average pet owner is, let's say, older than the Facebook community. So maybe 10 years ago it was just too early. Our hypothesis is right now is a great time, and you see players like Zooplus, for instance, they do quite well, but they're flying under the radar. So I think in combination with TV, this is a great opportunity, and it's a TV-able case, so that's why we decided to do it. But obviously, we're not only selling pet food, we're also selling, watches and jewelry. So everything where we say, there's a mass market, brands are important, something that ProSiebenSat.1 can really create, that's where we see an opportunity that we want to capture.
And how's Axel Springer doing that? Are you also doing e-commerce projects to sell the commerce via Build, or do you use your?
No, but regarding the later stage investments we did, we always said there should be a strategic fit. Now, doing early stage, we keep it quite flexible. Yes, with later stage, why did we say a strategic fit? If there's a fit, there's also leverage. And then we can also show it with past investments we have done, where we were really able, with the companies then, to outperform the market. And I want to add one thing, what you mentioned regarding the founders, retaining founders. And that's always a big picture. You described it, big corporates taking over small companies. And then after a short while, the founder leaves and the entity is fully integrated into big corporate. And then it fails. Yes, that's kind of the typical picture we have there. For us, and you do it also similar, we have always said, okay, if we find a very attractive target, let's keep the founders on board. We don't like to do 100% deals. We favor 51 or 75% deal where the founders remain with shares on board and you have synchronized the goals on value creation. And we have also examples in our company where we have always put call models, where we've turned it into an evergreen model, where the founders have said now, take Idealo, for example, the founder said, hey, this is great, let's continue. We don't want to exit anymore. Let's make this a continuous partnership.
That works really, really well if it's not in the same business as the parent company.
Yes.
Because what instantly happens is the new model cannibalizes somebody's revenue stream.
Absolutely.
And so our famous example in the States was Kodak, which very early on got into computers, got into digital photography, got into everything. And everything that their new divisions did was hampered by the parent company and sabotage because it affected somebody's getting their bonus and their profit margin. So that's where the tension is palpable in a big company. I won't talk out of turn about examples in my past, but Sony was a $100 billion company when I was running it. It's a $18 billion company today because they didn't see that all their divisions had to talk to each other. There was no ecosystem. Why should a guy making a camera have to know anything about the TV, know anything about the phone, know anything about the music? And they were all incompatible, and that was their undoing. So the challenge is not that a big company can be an entrepreneur and a startup. The challenge is if you're going to have a startup, get out of its way, even if it's cannibalizing your sales.
Can you change a big company?
Yes, it's very, very hard. It really takes, a dynamic CEO and a board that wants it. The only examples where I've seen that's been successful is where the board knows that they're throwing in the towel, where they're saying, we've got nothing to lose. We know the writing's on the wall. Let's try anything. And I had that luxury at EMI, a 100-year-old music company that invented the gramophone and, had been around forever. And I had a CEO, Ken Berry, who knew that the physical world was coming to an end. And he gave me the power to go out there and try everything, ringtones and downloads. And we didn't know if it could replace, if it could match, but we knew doing nothing meant drowning and going out of business. And so when you look a decade later, all the revenues came out of those new businesses that we started. It didn't replace or save EMI in the end, but there wouldn't be any music industry if we had it. So that's the challenge.
Let's take that same question to Jens.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a little bit of an insight because we with Hai obviously have quite some meetings about what's happening there, and insight from the outside and insight from the inside. And I personally find it fascinating, and I say that without any particular love for that company, but what I find so fascinating is that you guys seem to really mean it.
Yeah, well, we do. But there's one person also who's driving it, who's really pushing it hard, and it's what you mentioned. Also, if you question legacy systems, yes, if you don't have full support from CEO side, if he's not the driver, you won't survive. And if I take it also in our company, or if you take the print industry with classified markets, yes, they were in the best best position for online classifieds, but it's for online-only players who went in there. Why? Because all then come and said, okay, let's do a little bit online, but let's not affect our offline market. And so it was not full speed done. And then for us, it was a shift where we said, okay, online first. Let's compete with ourselves before other cannibalizes us, and that really made the shift. Right. But it's internally a barrier, and if you don't have a CEO who's driving it, the organization will squeeze you.
I think if you want to put it in a framework, right? I think the 4 things you really need to ensure. The one is capability building. Second is you have the right systems. Third, the role modeling. Yeah, and last but not least, the commitment and the understanding of the employees. Yeah? Capability building means get the right people in. I think at Epic, for instance, everybody we hired at Epic came from outside. Not a single person came from ProSiebenSat.1, right? We hired new capabilities that were not within the group previously. Secondly, the role modeling. I think the entire board is 100% committed, and they really mean it too. Yeah, just like in your case, this is important. Yeah, systems and structures, are the right incentives in place? You have to act differently. And last but not least, the commitment, the understanding. People know why they're there for. They know they have to create something. They have to ask for forgiveness, not for permission. These things, I think if you combine these 4 things, you're able to change an organization also in the long term. But these are really important factors.
Yeah, Flo, now I'm going to ask you something. Okay. So how IM doesn't have any corporate investors in, right? And you are...
By strategic, correct.
That's what I mean. You don't have strategic investors. You have sort of money from the capital markets. So what's your take on the big guys? And do you have any relationships with them? And if so, can you describe them?
I mean, absolutely. It's super crucial for us to first of all understand the markets who are driving that, who are the old players there, and what their problems are for sure. The question that from a founder's perspective, maybe that I have to say, the question is really like, how do we drive innovation for corporates? So maybe we go a little bit more solid and come up with examples here, because well, an accelerator is definitely not the only step that drives innovation in a company, and it's definitely just getting you into the market to get to work to these people, etc. But what I see, well, the issue here is really, I give an example. I had this conversation with this guy in London 2 weeks ago, and he worked for a big content company that I consider a competitor, actually. And what he was able of, he was working there for 7 years, becoming a senior innovation guy, and basically what he did, he had this great idea, which was similar to what we do, basically, and he was able to raise 250K internally. And that is a big deal in a corporate. He convinced his bosses and his boss, the bosses of his boss, and he got the money. And they told him, hey, you do that, you have this certain time frame. But he was still stuck in this organizational structure and had to deliver his everyday goals. What happened actually 4 months later, where he actually hired on his own a developer who helped him building that stuff, he was axed because his division was cut. And his project was dead. So what did he do? He applied at my company because, well, he thought like maybe we can deliver him a better, fruitful environment to, well, fulfill his dreams of pulling that off.
Did you hire him?
No comments.
I think that's an interesting one because I have a startup myself, and people coming from the corporate world are really hard to hire if you're from a startup because they. I mean, you can talk about it. I don't need to explain that.
Absolutely. First of all, because well, people who are very well established and have a long-term corporate career. I think this guy I said was there for 7 years. He had 2 kids and. Well, a lot in stake, basically, and it's not that easy to basically make the step and well join. Well, I consider ourselves still some kind of uncertain to market developments. But the second example I wanted to give is basically also what can corporates do? I mean, first of all, it's all about talent as well. Yeah? Like, how do I get the smart people who drive innovation in certain areas? We had this great company. Unfortunately, Conrad was supposed to be here today. The founder of Tape TV. He, in my opinion, he just bought the best mobile product team that is out there in Europe. The guys at Amen. Like, why the hell did no one else buy them before? Yeah? And why did actually startups starting to acquire startups before big guys do? And like tackle that talent, the talent from the market. I think for me that's the biggest mistake that happens here. The guys at Get Your Guide bought the guys at Gitsy, the second best mobile product team I've seen in the last couple of years. And that's for me like the biggest understanding. Maybe these guys are not known in the US or away in Europe, but I mean, someone must notice.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, I was just going to say one other tip or trick for those that are at the big companies. After the CEO buy-in, the other best friend that I always seek out is the CFO. And the reason is you have to come up with your own report card. You're not going to be measured by profits and loss. You're going to lose money, and you're going to lose a lot of money. But if you can establish what those benchmarks and goals and how to set up phantom accounting to compare to other things in the business, then they can suddenly see that you're succeeding compared to the competition. And that works really well. And where you'll see the CFOs that get this is look at annual reports that the cover is bragging about this little startup piece of a company when the company does billions and billions in sales, because they understand that that's their future and that's where they're trying to position it. And I see this time and time again happening more frequently, that if you can really come up with, if we were outside of the company, we would be $1 billion division even with these revenues. To retain good talent and attract talent, they need to be compensated in that manner. And we did this in the video game world, building video game division, where you said, okay, if these were startups getting this type of traction, a Zing or whatever, here's what the numbers would be worth. Doing inside a big company, those people should also be compensated the same way. So it's just a new way of looking at how you're attracting talent and retaining talent in a world where the pension and the gold watch are going away. Nobody's doing 20 years. I wouldn't want an employee for 20 years, because that means that their only skill set during those 20 years they got from your company, and they haven't gotten from everywhere else.
Let's talk about talent a little more in relationship to location. So Jens, you are big guys in Berlin, and just alone by the building size, I think the Deutsche Bahn building is maybe higher, but that's sort of the competition. What's up with Berlin and maybe Germany and maybe Europe, and what's your perspective on talent there?
No, I mean, we had two headquarters 10 years ago, Berlin and Hamburg, and we have moved it completely to Berlin. We also moved the Bild-Zeitung headquarter to Berlin. So Berlin is now Axel Springer's top hub, no doubt about it. And looking now at how Berlin is developing, especially last 2 or 3 years, it was absolutely the right move, also considering the entire ecosystem here regarding startups. I mean, 3-4 years ago, it was a competition of Berlin with other cities. Now Berlin is by far #1. Berlin, in a way, is itself a startup, and to be right in there is great, just location-wise. And that's what we are benefiting from. And I think also looking forward, Berlin, how it's situated now for the next year, I'm very confident that this will continue. And you also can see it, whether you are in the US or in London. What is interesting, it's always want to know about Berlin. Yes, it's not so much Axel Springer or Bild-Zeitung. When we go out there, you're from Berlin, then the people are listening. And that's great.
Yeah. How is that for you, Flo? Berlin, is there any competition?
In terms of attracting talent?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. It's getting there. So I basically used to work in New York before and made the clear decision to set up the company in Berlin, because that's where my key network was, basically where I saw basically a lot of blue ocean in terms of talent as well. Yeah? And for us, I think we're a team of 23 people at the moment, and we employ 16 nationalities. Yeah? I think that's something that is absolutely phenomenal. And really drives also like the creativity within the team, and I think that's really what it is. There's people.
What was your alternative to Berlin? Was there an alternative? I
didn't think about one. I mean, obviously, coming to Europe, you would consider London, but well, for us, I mean, it's when you're based in Berlin, it's simple. I mean, we got our capital in London, yeah. But we could still live and work from Berlin. So I see talent coming from everywhere, but it's really it's an international talent market. Yeah.
And Marto?
Fully agree. I think Berlin is a great place to foster creativity, to get influences from different angles. I think one thing that's worrying though is the development in terms of competition around talent and cost, etc. You know, every decent person in the online segment has 3 offers on the table at any given day of the week.
Crazy.
Right? So you always have to worry about, am I going to lose my key man, etc. So these things I look at with a worrying eye, and at the same time, if you look at salary development over the last few years, 3-4 years ago, Berlin salaries were really low. Today, you know, people people with 2-3 years experience, they ask for much more. So these things are developments that I don't really like, but still at the end of the day, we're still much better off than London or other cities where costs are incredibly high. But I think Berlin is a very inspirational place. It's getting on the agenda of international investors as well. So I think there's a lot of good things happening here, and with the help of all the media companies and startups. So I think in the years going forward, Berlin will really become one of the key hubs in the world outside of Silicon Valley. One thing though, if I might add, what I really would like from the Berlin startup scene is that it becomes more like a Silicon Valley when it comes to supporting others. In Silicon Valley, it's always about, you should meet this guy, I introduced you to that guy. In Berlin, my feeling is more about people, doing their thing and not wanting to share. So I would like to get this more collaborative environment in Berlin that I witnessed in Valley.
I completely disagree on that.
Oh, really?
No, seriously, because that might have been the case 2 years ago. Yeah. But I think all early stage companies, basically, it might not be visible to the press or anyone else, but there's trust circles everywhere.
Yeah. Maybe it's come to background.
No, but that's true as well. We talked about that earlier. I have some really good conversations with a lot of smart people at Rocket at the moment who help us as well. Yeah? Okay. And might be focused on online marketing, on how to do good PR, etc. So that is happening,
that's
for sure.
I want to have one more question to Jay, and then we open up for questions. What's your take on I mean, you have a different perspective, I guess, from the Valley on outside hubs of sort of innovation. What's your take on this?
So,
and be honest and tough with us. We don't mind.
If you look at the top 100 startups of the past decade, 5 years, whatever, the Facebooks, the eBays, the LinkedIns, they all pretty much come from the same place. So as I travel around the world, everybody wants to be the next Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has a very unique ecosystem, and the basis is not just the sharing at the human level of 5 guys at a bar can come up with a business, but everybody reinvesting because we're addicted to this. We like starting new. We like staying relevant. I mean, that's the honest to your question of why do I still do it. I don't want to talk about, hey, I'm the first guy that got video on a computer, back in the 80s. Aren't I cool? That's kind of boring. I like being, oh, social's new? Hey, I've got the biggest social app in all these countries. So it is difficult to replicate in a couple of years Silicon Valley, because what you really need is a couple billion-dollar successes that commit those dollars locally. So I have 100 engineers working in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is a startup bonanza right now because everybody that sells starts a gazillion more companies. And that ecosystem seems to be doing well. I think in the US, Israeli companies are number 3 on our stock exchange. So it's just a bizarre for such a small place. When I look at incubators around the US where, Pride for Austin or Tennessee or bumfuck, they invariably fail. And they invariably fail because they're taking the town leader and the leading industry and they're giving them office space and a foosball table and whatever else they saw on the Google tour. And what you really need is to get people on the boards of your startups that can mentor. That's one of the reasons why, I started with the Wall Street Journal, this Startup of the Year series to really try to show what mentoring is and getting Richard Branson to mentor and everybody else. And it's a lot of fun. So it's that knowledge that, by the way, the person you should look to hire is the person whose last startup failed because they learned an awful lot on somebody else's dime. It's the idea of hiring failure that is different than what people used to look for. I'm old enough where if I looked at a resume, somebody had 10 jobs, I'm like, what's wrong with this person? Where nowadays in Silicon Valley, 10 jobs, so they must be 3 years out of college. Because that's the speed at which loyalty goes in the Valley. So, it's really about adapting to this new world. And I couldn't say more about the fact that you can get talent anywhere. So the company's based in New York. I don't work in New York. The majority of our employees don't work in New York. And we take talent wherever we can find it, and teams wherever we can find it. And there's a lot of going on, especially in the States, of you can't hire individuals, so you acquire companies for the sole person of their talent, knowing that they proved their business model was a science experiment that they could get it to work. And then you just throw out that code and you assign that team to something that is relevant to you. And so acqui-hires is a big, big thing. And if you can hire a team for 10 million or less, on an earnout, then you know you've got a team that'll be with you for 3 years and is competent. And a lot of people look like, oh my God, we're spending that kind of money. Well, no, you're getting to market faster because you have a unit that can go and has shorthand.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. So, questions. If you have a question, please quickly state who you are, and if you want to address one of the panelists. And if you don't want to say who you are, that's also fine. Michael.
Hey, my name is Michael Lieber. I come more from the games industry. I picked up what Jay said in his keynote, the post-literate era we are into now. As I would say, for the games, it's also very necessary to say, okay, we're not in the Duden era anymore, we're more in the SUSE era. So my question is to Jens Müffelmann, who has a media empire based on Duden, basically. What's your take on the next steps? So which content trends are you foreseeing and where you're aiming at?
Okay, talking about Duden, maybe it's not that bad. I also noticed in Jay's presentation, you even mentioned paper at all. You talked about second screen becoming the first screen, but even not talking about paper anymore. Maybe we're still doing good business with paper, but for us, strategically, the key challenge is to transform our print brands to media brands, basically to liberate the content from the medium. And that's what we are working on now, that we say on whatever device content, information, entertainment is requested, we want to be present there with our brands. So it's not it's transforming a legacy system and not replacing it, and that's what we are putting full energy in, and that's even more important perhaps than doing acquisitions, whether we will be successful in this transformation from print to media brands, as it's the same for any publishing house, basically. That's a central challenge for the publishing houses.
a great print example to look at, which I don't know would be well known in Europe. Has everybody seen Dennis Rodman goes to North Korea, crazy lunatic guy? Well, the person that sent him there is a print brand called Vibe. It's a magazine, very small magazine that figured out how to make sensational content. They package as a TV show on HBO, and then that drives you for more in depth on the web and mobile. And a 20-person company is now a $1 billion+ valuation. And an old print guy, probably the oldest print guy on the planet, Rupert Murdoch, just invested at a $1 billion valuation because he sees that that cycle has been made complete by taking an established brand and revitalizing it.
More questions from the audience. Thank you.
Come on.
Yeah, take that.
Hey, my name is Christian. I'm a consultant. Jay, I want to push you one more time on the topic of Berlin as a startup hub. Okay. If you, let's say, were in charge of, buying a foosball table and providing structures for entrepreneurs to differentiate Berlin from other places, what would you do that is not ridiculous and that could have an impact?
I'm so ignorant of the local market. I mean, I literally flew in, so I can't name specific. But here's what I would do in any city. One, I would make sure that your infrastructure is as friendly and cutting edge as possible. So the reasons why Singapore jumped ahead quickly was you could put up one antenna and be 4G by noon, right? Whereas for a large country it would take longer. Why am I dying? Maybe it's the way I'm sitting. Look at, could Berlin be the first city to be all WiMAX? If everybody was 100% always on, always connected without a cell phone bill, what type of innovation would happen that the rest of the world would copy? Tie in with your universities to make sure that the right type of courses are being taught, that they're not teaching programming from 50 years ago. Is there a shortage of Ruby on Rails programmers? Or, what is the talent shortage? I don't know what your laws are on internships. Somebody told me that if you want to get a dedicated landline in your office, it could take you more than a month. That doesn't make any sense as a startup capital, okay? In Silicon Valley, you could lease your place and by noon have whatever size connectivity you want. And then taxation-wise, I was just in India where if you want to invest, even an Indian invest in an Indian startup, the government takes a 30% tax on the investment before it goes to the startup. This is counterintuitive. Startups are job creators. In the past recession, 8 out of 10 jobs in the US from the recovery were started by companies that have less than 10 people. So those are where I'd look. And then find partnerships and mentors from other markets. You know, put people on your boards. I mean, LinkedIn is the easiest way to find experts that might be in your field. Do you know Shoot, by the way? C-H-U-T-E? Yeah. So find other companies and other like-minded people doing this around the world. Co-opetition is really the other way to survive. It's not, I've got this great idea, I'm going to hold on to it, I'm going to smother it. It's who else has the same idea, and let them start building it in Brazil, and you're building it here, and even if you don't have any economic relationship, you'll learn from that back and forth.
There was one more question back there.
Okay, my name is Wolf, and I had the chance to be quite often in the US. But after all the stories I learned, and thank you, Jay, being here, I would like to think with you a little about another part of the story which maybe we are missing. I would just give you 30 seconds of thought. After Second World War, we had many planes coming over to Berlin to deliver coal and all kind of goods to survive. And sometimes now we see all you folks coming from the US to help us to survive. I would like to know what are the specific values we have here in Europe, and especially in Germany, which are good enough to work as an incubator independently from what you are doing. Do we have specific skills and values by which we can even better survive than you? Because I've been even more often than in US and Asia. I have a Chinese name. I've been working on Bunraku with the Japanese guys. I've been working in Malaysia and India and Singapore, whatever. And when I see these guys, I think we all have to learn our lessons as well in the US, as well in Europe. So if we open up the horizon to what we're doing here, maybe would like to have from you just a little idea what you think will be the next lesson to be learned out of the European and the US field related to what are the specific skills we're going to learn from the competitive countries in Asia. Thank you for this difficult question.
Real quick.
Not difficult, but in no way am I sitting here saying US has all the answer, go Yankee. I've been in business 30 years and I have yet to work for a US company. Interesting. What is unique in Germany, in German culture, and Europe culture and other, heck if I know. I don't live here. So it would be arrogant of me to answer that question. What I can tell you is the only difference that I see in having run businesses in 30 countries is the US has no shame in failure. And I've been to countries where if you take and raise money from friends and family and lose it, they dig up your ancestors and do things to their skulls, okay?
All right.
And when I teach at a university that 70% of the students are from outside the US, University of Southern California. And that was an intentional decision of the university so that we could get the best and brightest and export this non-fear of failure. That's the only truly US thing we have. What you have that the US doesn't, that is most obvious, is we're the most ethnocentric people in the world. We only learn geography by bombing. And so we think most countries don't exist anymore because we don't have to go to foreign markets because our domestic market is so big. The majority of our Congress doesn't have a passport, okay? So that's the global perspective. What you have then as an advantage is that you're used to working with multiple cultures, you're used to working with multiple languages, you're used to working with multiple character sets, and thank God you all communicate using English, because I'd be dead otherwise. So that's your advantage, where the US doesn't have that natural. So your ability to develop something here and have it penetrate China is much faster and easier than many US companies go about working in China. But that's, you know, I can't sit here. I'm not here to sit what's happening in the local scene. I literally got off the plane.
But I think this is a very good final statement. That we have the ability to actually go out and conquer the markets that the US don't conquer because their market is too big. Unless you want to say anything.
No, I just wanted to add just one thing, because I used to export German knowledge to the world, right? When I was at Rocket Internet before joining ProSieben. Yeah, I mean, I went to Malaysia, I went to India, I went to Vietnam and everywhere, and I think there are two core skills that we were always able to export and become successful because of them. The one is really functional knowledge. Try to find an online manager in Malaysia. It's really tough. If you send a German guy or an American guy, or they can train them, and after 6 months you also have them there. But for a start, that's always a good competitive edge. The second edge, I was in India for 7 months. Yeah, just being there, being structured. The classic German skills. Just being there, helping people to become structured, set up processes. All these things, they meant a lot and was a big success factor in India. Again, after 12 months, they all knew it themselves. But you have to teach people, because you cannot know or you cannot miss what you don't know. So I think these are virtues that Germany or also US can export to many emerging markets. And same for Brazil, South Africa, etc. I've seen it over and over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Sure.
Thanks for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. And thanks to the panelists.